Check, check.
As a private company, how does it
Check, check. Check, 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 check. Check, check. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check, check. Hey, Jade, turn the mic on. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out to the Carbon and Emery Energy Collaborative. We're real excited to have some of our speakers here. I promise you there's going to be plenty of time for breaks, and we have a networking break planned where you can keep mingling and talking, and I encourage you as we're doing these presentations to ask questions to our presenters. They're ready to answer any questions you might have. I'm Jade Powell. I'm the Deputy Director here at the Southeastern Regional Development Agency, and we help pull together this energy collaborative between the Office of Energy Development and the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. And we're grateful for their partnership and helping us get the speakers and pulling together a great agenda. It just disappeared, but that is where you can scan the agenda to see speakers. I did print out some, but I only print out a few. But you should be able to scan that QR code, and they're also posted on the doors. Feel free anytime throughout today, this morning, to step out if you need to take a phone call, anything, get a snack. Restrooms are, if you come out this door and to the left and then just keep going to the left, they're basically right behind me. And with that, I'm going to introduce Jen Middleton. She is the Deputy Director of the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining, and she will take it away for the rest of today. Thank you.
Hello and welcome. So, of course, we have a great agenda as usual, and we're going to start with the Carbon County Economic Development Update with County Commissioner Jared Haddock. Thank you.
we able to pull that up from the screen, Jade? Wonderful, thank you. Thank you all. I'm glad to be here and glad to represent Carbon at this moment. I just wanted to go over, we did a history a while ago, I think during the time that I was running election, where we kind of wanted to identify what's happened in Carbon County over the last decade or so. And as you can see, in 2008, that was kind of the glory years. The residents were only paying 32% of the total tax bill. So that's the local resident homes as well as the local businesses. The centrally assessed were near 70%. That's when the mines were doing great. We had our power plant here, and you can see how much of the tax they paid. They're in the black over there on the far end. That's how much they were paying of our total tax bill. As you can see, the declining trend, every time a mine went under or was out of utility for whatever reason, they continued to decline. We've lost probably over $1 billion in value in centrally assessed in the last decade. And now we get to the low point, I think, this latest was in 2024 when it was just a little over 20% is what centrally assessed was paying. So that means who makes up the difference? The locals. And so we've been hurt quite significantly with taxes, and we can see the main reason why. So the reason we're bringing this up is not doom and gloom. It's to say this is the reality of how we got to where we are and how do we fix it. Thankfully, I'm very grateful to be serving with Commissioner Jensen as well as Commissioner Martinez, and that they had the foresight to see this trend before it started going much further and started the economic development plan to help bring new industry in the area. Without that new industry, that's the only way that amount can be reversed. The most feasible way that we can have that amount get reversed. And we've got over 19 different companies we're working with, very heavily. Our economic development director's spinning her wheels, Shani Wilson, because she's doing such a great job. We'll hear about some of those projects today, such as Valor. In fact, it was just here we met. SERDA helped put the deal together when they first came. And we introduced them, of course, in Emery, and with their energy center there, it was a perfect fit. And we're grateful to have them in our community. And anything they do affects us just like anything we do affects them. We're grateful for the collaborative between Carbon and Emery County. And the other thing is we have one interesting thing is we had another business open just yesterday. Well, I guess they did their ribbon cutting yesterday, and that was a CO2 sink. And what they do is they take wood chips, turn it into biochar, which can be used for soil amendment, and they have a very clean process. What's interesting is that they take the heat that's produced and convert it into power, and to not only power that facility, but also take the excess heat and warm up the buildings. They don't have to use any extra electrical or natural gas for that, and to dry the wood chips to make them easier to burn. And then any excess they can take, and I think they've worked a deal out with Rocky Mountain Power to be able to sell that to neighbors or wherever that goes. The reason that matters is because one such company that's interested, we've heard a lot about data centers, and there was one who's interested, but it may be continuing to move forward. We know it's kind of seems like a bad word, but if you think about it, the value to the community could help replace a large percentage of what we've lost. And one of the biggest concerns with data centers is the heat that's generated from the natural gas generators that they use to produce the energy that they need, because they're not hooking onto the grid, of course. And this is a great way to not only take that excess heat and do something with it, but actually convert it into additional energy, thus lowering the amount of generators that are needed and be able to have a clean and not really affect the environment as many would be concerned with. The other thing to please note is that they are closed loop systems. That means very little water use. I think Emery County had one that claims 0 water use, and I think that's awesome. But either way, they're resolving the concerns that were once created from these data centers. But the impact of just one in our area, Carbon County, would be the equivalent of replacing 4,200 homes. Do you know how much water 4,200 homes would take? 4,200 acre feet of water. And so having one industry that could do that is very significant in our area, and we're strongly encouraging that. Any success that we have, or the future commissioners that come in Carbon County, it'll be based on the hard work and effort of the previous commission. These deals take years to come to fruition. They're very fickle. It's all built on relationships, not just numbers. I think that's very, very important to know. And those personal relationships are sometimes the reasons people come here. And I'm very grateful for that. So I just wanted to leave that with you, that things are looking up in our area. I think we've talked about some of the other companies that were coming. We're excited for them. We have an NDA that hopefully will still be coming, and what they will do. And they will add a new industry. Now, we have NDAs because it's usually the company's choice, because proprietary rights, competition, or other things in their industry that are confidential. And that's why and as soon as we can talk about it, we'll be the first to announce the company. But I can say this, that they are a different industry than what we currently have. And I think those jobs, of over 100 jobs, would be very beneficial to our area. Because even if you have all the houses in Carbon County, why would somebody stay here if you don't have a good job? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Haddock. Next up is the Emery County Economic Development Update by County Commissioner Jordan Leonard. Thank you.
Excited to be with you today. Thanks, Commissioner. Looking around the room, there are a lot of partners that help Emery County become and be what it is. And so thank you for all of your efforts. A couple of things to highlight with the few minutes I have. I want to talk about economic development and the different types of economic development. The first would be recruitment. So looking at Valor on the back row, we're excited for them to be in our community. They're hiring our local folks from Carbon and Emery County. Just visiting with Jess. Those people that they hire, sometimes we have to backfill those jobs. Our rec director went to work for Valor, but it was cool to see a local out of the area with a young family be able to come back to our community. So as these jobs open up, others are able to move back home and be with their family. So excited about that. I'll let Valor talk. It looks like they're on the agenda. I'll let them visit about what they're doing. We're trying to expand the industrial park just north of the research center. Love the research center as well, and all of you that brought that to our community. They're doing research, and they're looking to build out as well. So the research center, we're looking to help support them and their growth. The inland port has been a part of our community as well. Green River has some projects that are looking to move into that project area. If you want to understand inland ports a little better, please stick around and I can visit with you about those, or those that are more familiar. When you think of the inland port, you may think of, shipping containers, kind of a centralized area where you ship it to the coast. And then that was the intent in the first place, but it's moved into project areas. I won't go too much into that, but if you're interested in the inland port and project areas, we can visit after. Another cool project in Green River would be Blue Castle. They're looking at Green River as a landing place for that. These would also be small nuclear modules similar to Valor on a smaller scale. Another company that's exciting is A1 Lithium. Many of you have probably heard of A1 Lithium and have been a part of supporting them as they extract brine from the ground and get lithium from that. A couple other things that we're focusing on, natural gas. Way excited that Green River was able to get natural gas, and those that legislators and representatives and those that help support that. So we also need natural gas in Emery town, which would be a big deal for some of our businesses there, as well as in Lawrence. So those will be a couple of our focuses would be natural gas to Emery town and Lawrence. So those are some projects. Shifting gears a little bit, kind of on the community or the business development end. We partner really close with our chamber. I believe Patsy's here. We do small business development grants. We get excited when our businesses hire 1 or 2 new people because they are able to grow their business. So we use our rural county grant. Deborah has helped us, from the state level to move that forward. So we're able to help our small businesses, our junior entrepreneurs, our small business development opportunities there and growth. And then the last thing I want to talk about real quick would be leveraging our fiber internet. Emery Telecom's amazing to have fiber internet to the home and business. One thing that we've kind of latched onto is remote work and online jobs. We're partnering with Utah State University with the Rural Online Initiative, where they help. I work intimately with that program to help people find jobs online and generate that income. Another program that we have is and support would be the e-commerce accelerator program. Stacy Ann's here if you have any questions about that. That is helping agriculture businesses get online and sell their products online. There have been a lot of success stories in Carbon and Emery County getting some of these small businesses off the ground and selling online. Another thing that we really focus on is we want Emery County to be a great place to live, work, and play. And so we have events through our tourism office, fishing tournaments, golf tournaments. We really try to develop our community so that we can have people that want to live in Emery County. I live here because I love to golf, fish, and hike, and so having opportunities for those that work and live here. The other thing that we're really concerned about is housing. I know there are some homes available in Farron and some other communities, but we need to partner with builders that are looking to grow our community. We don't want to explode in Emery County, but we do want to have slow, sustainable growth with a tax base that can sustain us. So those are some of the things that we're working on. If it kind of sparked any thoughts or questions, I'll be around all day. But thanks for the time, and hope you have a good day.
Thank you, Commissioner. Sounds like this area is booming, and in part, it is because of the strong foundation that was built in this area. Up next is, actually, let me pause. There will be a change in the agenda. Valor Atomics will be going at 10 o'clock, and Operation Gigawatt will be the last speaker. Just a heads up to the little agenda edit there. But up next is Wolverine Fuels update, and that is by Jake Smith, who is the General Manager of the Engineering and Technical Team. Thank you.
Slide advancer.
Yeah, just the big green button in the middle is the
Big green
advancer.
button. Okay, perfect. Appreciate everyone being here today. So, as was announced, my name is Jake Smith. I'm over all of our engineering and technical services for Wolverine Fuels. I'll apologize on behalf of Carson Palastro. He's our CEO. He was planning on being here, but he had to be back east and he couldn't make his plane flights work. So he asked me to represent us today. Just want, for those of you who may be a little bit unfamiliar with Wolverine Fuels, I just want to do a brief overview of who we are. Just some introductions. So Carson Palastro is our Chief Executive Officer. He actually grew up here in Price. So he's a carbon counter native. He's a 4th or 5th generation coal miner. A lot of history there. Mark Maglione our Chief Operating Officer. John Byers is our Vice President of Operations. He grew up in Emery town. Patrick Barrett is our Vice President of Commercial Operations, and then Kim Colton's our General Counsel. So you'll probably recognize some of the names up here on our General Managers list. Jake Wilson, he's the General Manager of the Sufco mine, grew up in Wellington. Pat Smewen is the General Manager of our Emery Valley mine. He grew up here in Price as well. Kurt Tatton, he's been in Wellington his whole life. A lot of you guys probably recognize Kurt's name. And then Jed Gordon lives in Utah County. He's the General Manager of our Skyline mine. And then I'm the General Manager of Technical Services. So Wolverine Fuels, we are a Utah-based company, and we employ over 1,000 employees. So at Sufco, we have 400 employees. At Fossil Rock, we're budgeted to employ about 365. Emery Valley, we have 150 employees, and then at Skyline, we have 100 employees. So overall, we employ over 1,000 people. So speaking to our Emery and Carbon County, over half of those employees live in Emery and Carbon. So the rest are kind of spread throughout Sevier, Sanpete, and Utah County. But the majority of our workforce comes from Emery and Carbon. We are the largest and longest producer of bituminous coal in the western U.S., and we are the sole producer of coal in the state of Utah right now. So we have over 150 million tons of reserves, and we're very safety-minded and environmentally conscious. So just talking a little bit about our mission. So our mission is to meet the growing global energy demand by supplying low-cost, high-quality coal for from safe and environmentally responsible operations. So we all understand that our energy demand is not going to go down as we move forward. It's going to continue to increase. We're not naive enough to think that coal is the only answer, right? I believe it's going to have to be an all-of-the-above approach in order to be able to meet the energy demand that we are going to see moving forward, especially with data centers, okay? We're all aware of, there's a lot of conversation, especially in the state of Utah, because the state of Utah has kind of become a hub for data centers. And that's primarily driven because of all of the data networks it's a crossroads for the data networks. So it's a very logical place for have these data centers, but with the data center, it has a big need for power, but also water. So we've heard a lot of about that in the news, right? And we want to be part of the solution to be able to supply power, and not only to the data centers, but all the rest of the growing energy demand. We have 5 operations. I'm going to try to move through this quickly, but we have 5 operations that we can produce coal out of. The first is Sufco, It's located in Sevier Valley, in Sevier County. So it's been our longest operating mine. It started in 1941. It's been continuously operated since then. We've produced over 190 million tons of coal out of that mine. We still have 50 million tons of reserves there, so well over 15 years of reserve life. Currently, we're operating around a 3 million ton per year mark. There is some latent capacity. We could increase that depending on demands. This last summer, we've went into a drilling program, so we're exploring a potential reserve on the north side of the muddy drainage. So we did a series of 10. We're just wrapping up the drilling program, so we did 10 drill holes there to be able to understand what that potential reserve would look like. So plenty of life left at Sufco with the potential of continuing to expand that life. So we feel that's a great thing for our communities. The Fossil Rock Mine, so it was formerly known as the Trail Mountain Mine. So it's located in Cottonwood Canyon between Orangeville and Joes Valley Reservoir. So that mine was previously operated as the Cottonwood, or the Trail Mountain Mine. We restarted it in 2024. That mine has 51 million tons of reserves, so we're planning on running that mine somewhere between 3 and 4 million tons per year. So that should give that mine over 15 years of life as well. So Emery Valley is the most recent addition to our portfolio. It was previously operated by Bronco. We acquired that mine in February. It's got around 17 million tons of reserves. So we're producing around 900,000 tons a year. So we've got over 15 years of reserve life there as well. We have the Skyline Mine. I'll talk a little bit more about Skyline. It's located in Sanpete County. It kind of borders Sanpete County and Carbon County. Skyline's been in operation since 1984. It's been a great asset, huge contributor to the economic state of our counties. Right now, our reserve life is a little bit unknown because of some flooding that we experienced earlier in the year. And then the last one is the Dugout Canyon Mine. So it's located here in Carbon County. We still have around 7.5 to 8 million tons of reserves there. It was idled back in 2018 just because of some demand issues and manpower issues. But we have the ability to reopen that mine, and ultimately we would like to do that. And once we reopen it, we anticipate running that mine right around 500,000 to 1 million tons a year. So that'll give us well over 8 years of life there. So really, when you look at it, our company is very strong. And one of the things that we have backing us is Trafigura. So Trafigura is our parent company. It's a commodity trading company based out of Geneva, Switzerland, and they are very pro-coal. They see the future. They understand the energy demands of the future, and they believe in us, and they continue investing in us. I was asked earlier today if people are still investing in coal, and the answer is yes. We can prove that because we just spent quite a bit of money to buy Emery, but also we spent on the north side of $125 million just over in the last 2 years to get the Fossil Rock Mine developed and running. So when you look at that, a lot of the money that we spent there came right back into the community by way of the vendors that are supporting the coal mines here. So we really appreciate the community and the knowledge and the strength that we have when it comes to equipment, electrical, all of the support that we need is here in the communities. So one of the things that we really like to talk about is our safety. I know that especially with mining, there's a lot of nerve, and because we're such a highly regulated industry, a lot of people don't really even understand what we do. It's kind of a black box industry is what I like to say. And there's a lot of negative connotation, especially when it comes to safety. But we always talk about we have three priorities, and the number one priority is protecting our people, right? Because we're only as good as the people that we employ, right? And if we don't have good people, we don't have anything. We just have a hole in the ground, right? So we really like to protect our people. We implemented back in 2005, 2006, a behavior-based safety program. And really, that behavior-based safety program drives the culture of the company. And it's trying to adapt safety as a value that you take home with you every day, not just a policy that you go and you adhere to when you go to work, right? It's actually a value that you adapt. When you look here on this slide, what I've got in the light bars is what the national average is, right? And the darker bars is what our results have been. So you can see that we're significantly lower than the national average when it comes to lost time injuries, right? So this is an injury rate. It's divided, so you take your injuries and you divide it by 200,000 man hours, right? But you can see that the way that we've performed is much better than what the national average is. Some of the other things that I just like to point out. So the Sentinels of Safety Award is an award that's given to the safest underground coal mines in the nation, right? And we've won that in 2023 and 2024. That was at the Skyline mine. They were doing an excellent job. Our other mines are very close in tow, but it's something that we can really be proud of. We also work with the Utah Mining Association and the Rocky Mountain Coal Mining Institute every year. The last few years, we've been receiving awards from them as well. So it's something that we really take serious, and we're really proud of our safety performance. Just sort of for some benchmarking, we look at this on a continuous basis. So this is a total reportable injury rate for the first quarter of 2026. So you can see that we're all the way on the left side of the graph, and this is stacking up to all of our competitors. So that's where our goal is to always be leading the charge when it comes to our safety. The next thing that we talk about is protecting, once we protect our people, we've got to protect the mine, right? And that comes through regulation. So we have MSHA inspectors at our mines typically on a daily basis, right? And we have very clear regulations that we have to adhere to. And that's not only for safety of our employees, but also the safety of the mine. We work with DOGM, all of our other agencies in order to protect the environment. Those are things that we take very, very serious, right? And you can see here, so what this is showing is the violations per inspector day. We receive violations if we're not in compliance with the regulations. So similar to the last graph, so the light bars are what the national average is, the dark bars are what our average is. So you can see that for the most part over the last 15 years, we've been well below the national average. So this is one that we really like to present. This is our environmental performance. So you can see over the last 15 years, we received one violation in 2016, and then we received two in 2023. The two that we had in 2023 were associated with our discharge. So we had a new discharge that we put in at the Skyline mine, and as we started that up, there's some very strict discharge parameters on the water quality. We're actually more strict than what you would see in drinking water standards, and we took it upon ourselves to be able to meet those standards. And we had two incidences where we exceeded those, and we self-reported. We ended up receiving violations on behalf of that, but we took those. But other than that, we haven't received any environmental violations. So that's with all of the agencies that we work with. It's something that we take pride in, and is taking care of the environment. Just like you all, we like to recreate in the outdoors, right? And we take it very serious. We want to protect the mountains in the area that we work in. So talking a little bit more about the economics. So we do have a very large impact on the economics of the area. As it's been pointed out, historically, this industry kind of dominated the area, and the industry has continued to decrease slightly over the years. But when it comes to Wolverine Fuels, we still are a major economic driver of the local industry and the local economy, and we want to continue doing that, and we want to continue to grow and be a good foundation and a base for the industry, for the area. Just want to talk a little bit about some of the numbers here. So I'm showing our numbers for 2025 and then what our estimated numbers are for 2026. So this has all of our different mines, so Sufco, Fossil Rock, Emery Valley, and Skyline. Emery Valley, obviously in 2025, won't have any numbers in there because we didn't own the mine at that time. But in 2025, I'm just going to talk about the totals. So we produced around 7.5 million tons of coal. Total sales value of that was around $474 million. We employed, if you do the math there, you're looking at a little over 1,200 employees. That's direct employees to the company of Wolverine Fuels. And as I indicated, right now we're sitting at about 50% of those employees are coming from Emery and Carbon County. As far as contract trucking, there was 217 truckers that were hired from the local area to be able to support the coal mines and the transportation of the coal. And then as far as the other support jobs, you can look at the data anywhere between, like they use a 3-to-1 ratio all the way up to a 7-to-1 ratio. So we've kind of just fell in the middle here. We're showing a 5-to-1 ratio. So for every coal mining job, there's typically about 5 other support jobs that are there to support the coal miner himself via our vendors, but also hospitals and everyone else that's there to support that job and their family. So when you look at over almost 6,000 jobs there, so we figure there's about 7,400 jobs that Wolverine Fuels really kind of generates in the local communities. As far as our economic impact, by the time you look at our payroll, our supplies, our utilities and everything, it was $317 million that came back into the communities. So that's our direct impact. As far as taxes and royalties, you were looking at $44 million. So for a total direct impact of $361 million. So pretty large impact. When you take into account the trucking and the freight, we were just over $400 million last year. We're going to be similar to that this year. It has went down just a little bit. We're looking at producing just under 6 million tons this year compared to last year. And one of the main drivers of that is the idling of the Intermountain Power Plant over in Delta. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the opportunity that we have there moving forward. But yeah, when you look at these numbers, I think it's very evident the impact that the coal industry and Wolverine Fuels itself has on the local communities, especially Emery and Carbon County. Wrong button. Okay, so I'll go into a little bit of our operations. Skyline Mine, I just want to give a little bit of an update here. I know that there's a lot of, it's hit the news and there's probably been a lot of rumors floating around. So what I like to do is I like to just control the narrative and tell you exactly what's going on. So on January 28th, while mining, we experienced a large inflow of groundwater, which overwhelmed our mine dewatering system. So for safety of our miners and equipment, we, as a company, we elected to retreat our people and our equipment from the affected area. So in collaboration with Pacificor, our water levels underground, we've been monitoring that. We've been monitoring Electric Lake, our aquifers. We've got a lot of piezometers and groundwater monitoring wells. So we're monitoring the aquifers around. We're currently running 5 dewatering pumps. We've got 5 dewatering pumps that are installed inside of the mine, and we're discharging around 16,000 gallons a minute into Electric Lake. And we're currently in the process of drilling a dewatering well near Bulger Reservoir. So The intent of that well is to capture the water before it actually enters the mine workings. And while we're doing all of that, we do have one continuous miner unit operating there at the Skyline mine. So we do still have reserves there. We're trying to do some additional exploration to understand what that reserve life may look like moving forward, right? But Skyline's been a great asset, and like I said, one of our key values is protecting the mine, protecting our people, protecting the environment, and that's really what we're focused on right now at Skyline. So, as far as Emery Valley goes, I mentioned that it's our newest asset. So in December 2nd of 2025, Bronco idled the mine and laid off all but 12 employees. On February 17th, Wolverine Fuel purchased certain assets from Bronco, and by the 23rd, so 5 days later, we were back in operation, right? And currently we're employing 150 people there, and we're fully staffed at 150. So that's been a great asset. I know that there was a lot of people that were really nervous. We actually, in December, when those employees were laid off, we pretty much gave all of those employees an opportunity to come to Wolverine Fuels, with the intent of hoping that we were able to actually make an acquisition. So in February, when we ended up closing the deal, a lot of those employees were able to go right back to work. So also some of the employees, so just the way that the timing worked out because of the Skyline incident, some of the employees from Skyline were able to transfer there as well. So it's been a great asset. We're happy to have Emery Valley within the portfolio. Fossil rock, this is probably the most exciting one for us. So this was kind of a pet project for us for a lot of years, kind of wondering when we'd ever have the opportunity to do it. It was a project that me and a small team were working on kind of in the background, trying to get our MSHA plans in place and a lot of our permitting set up just in the event that demand demonstrated that we needed the asset. Unfortunately, because of the fire that experienced at Lila Canyon, we were actually purchasing over 90% of the coal from Lila Canyon and brokering it to meet our coal sales demand. So when Lila Canyon experienced the fire, it really forced the need to open Fossil Rock to be able to offset the coal that they were producing. So in 2024, in June, we reopened the mine and began rehabilitation. So it took us about 6 months rehabilitating the existing workings before we could actually get a continuous miner unit going. In December of 2024, we started our first continuous miner unit doing development for the new mine workings in June. So we kind of staggered them about 6 months apart just for manpower purposes, to be able to hire and train. So by June of 25, we started our second unit of development. And then in December of 25, we started our third unit in development. In February, we completed our new office building. So it's a big 3-story building. It's a multi-purpose building. So our main floor is pretty much dedicated to the maintenance of our equipment and our warehouse. The second floor is our bathhouse. And then the third floor is where our mine offices are located. So it's a great building, great facility. We did that to be able to set it up to make sure that property can be successful moving forward. The existing coal handling facility, when Pacificor operated this mine, they ran an overland conveyor from the mine over through Cottonwood, and they pulled it through out of their other coal loading facility. So that facility was only developed really for maybe 1 to 2 CMs, so it wouldn't handle longwall coal. So what we ended up having to do is come in and put in a whole new coal handling facility to be able to accommodate longwall coal and the continuous loop of trucks that we were going to see there. So we were able to complete that in April of 2026. And then a month later in May is when we completed the development of our first longwall panel and commissioned the longwall. So right now we're about 335 employees. Our budget is 365, so we're continuing to build employees and train a workforce there. So this has been a great project for us. As I mentioned before, it was about $125 million capital investment in order to be able to get that mine running. And we're very appreciative of Traffic Gear and their continued support for us and the communities here. So just give you a little bit of a snapshot of what our year looks like. So these are the 4 mines: Sufco, Fossil Rock, Emery, and Skyline. So in total, we'll produce just under 6 million tons per year. So for many of you who are familiar with coal mining, 6 million tons per year between 4 operations is pretty light, right? So this just kind of gives you an idea of what kind of latent capacity we have. So we are working diligently as a commercial team and as an organization to be able to look at opportunities that we have to place coal in the western U.S. We're looking even in the Midwest. We continue to look at opportunities in the international market. And then I'll talk a little bit about one of the opportunities we have in front of us, which is the Intermountain Power Plant. So that's kind of our next point here is the Intermountain Power Plant. So many of you are familiar with the Intermountain Power Plant. It's located in Delta, Utah. It began construction in 1984. I believe it was commissioned in 85, 86. But it's been a main stay over there in the state of in Delta, in the county over there. But for political reasons, Los Angeles chose, and the state of California, I should say, chose to no longer accept power that's generated from coal, right? And as such, the power plant was idled. But the interesting thing is, before they idled it, so in April of 2025, IPA submitted an air quality application intended to preserve the possibility of the continued coal unit operation, right? So there's been some rumor out there that if the coal plant is ran, the natural gas plant that they built next to it can't run. That isn't necessarily true. In July of 25, they took their last delivery of coal. But at the same time, the state of Utah and IPA entered an agreement to allow Utah to explore acquiring the coal plants. In November of 25, they ceased coal-fired generation, and an RFI was issued seeking information from parties interested in operating one or both of the coal plants. And then in March of 26, House Bill 514 became law, which provided mechanisms intended to help finance and acquire energy infrastructure and kind of really opened the door for us to go in after the Intermountain Power Plant. And then in June of 2026, the Utah Energy Council authorized IPA to initiate and conduct an RFP. We believe that here in the near future, there'll be a new owner of the Intermountain Power Plant. We're very excited about that and the opportunity that it gives us to continue to produce coal and sell it and be able to continue producing power in the state of Utah with the Intermountain Power Plant. So kind of covered a lot of information here. Just want to open it up to see if anybody has any questions. No questions? Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Great talk, thank you. So when we think about the stable base energy that is brought to the area, and we reviewed the stable base jobs, and we talked about the stable base in tax revenue and the community impacts that that brings for the whole community through energy in this area. Next up is Valor Atomics, and we're interested in how we can expand our energy portfolio in Utah and how we can build on that base that's already existing here. So up next is Valor Atomics, Jess Housekeeper, who is the Director of Utah Operations. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. It's always good to be here. Appreciate the information before. Wolverine Fuels, I've worked with them in the past at the Hunter Power Plant, and I didn't realize how extensive your operations were, so thank you for that. Today I would like to talk about Valor Atomics, kind of a new show in town. I know I see a lot of familiar faces around. But I'd like to speak a bit on, oh, hello, Mr. Corianis. I haven't seen people for quite a while that are here today. So I'd like to talk about what we've done in the past, give a little lesson on nuclear power. Not everybody knows how the fission reaction works. I know a lot of you have gotten questions about that because you've asked me about it, and so I put it into some slides. We'll talk a little bit about nuclear physics and again how the fission reaction works. And we'll show you some pictures of some of the processes which we use. So as Valor Atomics, we want to make power 10 times cheaper and then make it 10 times cheaper again. And we've realized that that is fully within the power and the grasp of technology and in specifically in nuclear power. We love coal, and we love coal power plants, right? All energy is good energy, and it's not a question of either or, it's a question of more and more, right? As energy demand increases, the energy supply barely is going up over the next several decades, and we want to be a positive contributor to that, both in the energy perspective, but also in our local communities in the Carbon and Emery County areas, and as we expand across the United States and ideally across the world, right? People's quality of life is directly proportional to their access to reliable, affordable energy, specifically electrical energy, but also in hydrocarbons. And we want to be a driving force for the positive good within the world of raising the quality of life of not only us as Americans, but those in other countries as well. So a lot of us have heard the term offshoring, right? A lot of the jobs, a lot of the heavy industry has been offshored. But recently in conversations I've heard one time at least of something being onshored. We almost never hear onshoring because we're bringing things back to America. As we have cheap energy, we're allowed and able to bring those things back to America. Why did we get rid of steel manufacturing? Power costs too much, right? It's all economics, right? But if we can bring, again, this power 10 times cheaper and then 10 times cheaper again, we can do that. So giant power plants that you see, right? The hyperbolic chambers, the Homer Simpson type power plants. I consider those kind of like the Ferrari or the F1 race car. They're amazing machines, super powerful, but also they cost billions and billions of dollars to construct. They always go way over budget and they always go way over schedule. And our idea is that you can mass manufacture. This is a piece of mechanical hardware. It does have nuclear fission in it, but also it's just pumps and pipes. And that's the beauty of Emery and Carbon counties, is that we are an energy area. We understand machinery. We understand how to operate machinery. We understand how to build machinery. And again, it's nothing super fancy, and we'll talk somewhat about that. And Valor Atomics, we want to rapidly iterate through the hardware. We like to joke that there's a bunch of nuclear companies out there that have never done anything but produce paperwork, right? You have a paper reactor because you've got piles and piles of paperwork showing calculations and all this stuff. But they've never actually built a reactor. They've never turned one on. So we joke that you're not a true nuclear company until you've split an atom, right? Until you've actually turned a nuclear reactor on. And that's what we've done here about June 18th, I think? We went critical for the first time at the, June 2nd? Oh, thank you. That's a good point. That's the second time. We went critical for the first time in Emery County, but the second time as a company. Thank you very much for that. We went critical back in November for the first time as the first startup in history to have gone critical in their setup. So then we did power operations a couple of weeks later, which means that we were able to transfer that heat from the reactor, bring it over to a usable location, and we powered a small NVIDIA chip, again becoming the first startup, the first private company to ever have done power operations and to power an AI data center of sorts. So to start off, I don't know if somebody can dim the lights or something. We're going to start off with a video that kind of gives a history of Valor Atomics from our initial construction, from our thermal testing prototype over in Los Angeles, our collaboration with the Department of War in shipping our reactor over here on C-17s, which was a really cool project. Then delivering it through Highway 6 and the beautiful countryside through there. You'll see a lot of those images as we trucked it down. And final setup and criticality of the reactor. I was about to ask you to go forward, but I have a clicker right here in my hand. So.
can't go on camera right now because we're not allowed to have any video footage or photos. Everybody on the call is learning for the first time that Valor Atomics became the first startup to achieve criticality at 11:45 a.m. this morning.
We're 250 is critical. Reactor critical.
At that video. At least I think so. I'm looking at the back row of everybody's been involved in this project too. It is fantastic to have heard the words, the reactor is critical. So what does that mean though? What does it mean the reactor is critical? A lot of times in the videos, in movies, people say, oh, the reactor's critical, we're all gonna die, right, or whatever, right? No, the reactor is critical just means that it's on. It's turned on as a self-sustaining fission reaction. What does that mean? So nuclear fission is you take one neutron. A neutron is a subatomic particle, right? It's part of an atom. That part of an atom flies in, and you'll see the fissile nucleus, which is uranium-235, which we use as uranium. As it impacts and adds energy to that, think of a bullet hitting something, right? A milk jug, a tannerite, something like that, it explodes, right? What we do is we add energy to the atom, and then that atom splits apart. So it splits the nucleus apart. There's an enormous amount of binding energy, right? That atom wants to stay together. As we release that atom from being combined and bound together, some of that energy goes off as thermal energy, a little bit of heat. Almost completely insignificant on one atom scale. Billions, oh, I lost my mic. Oh, there we go. If you do that billions and billions of times per second, it actually becomes an appreciable amount of heat, right, that we can actually use. So not only do you release energy as you split that atom apart, you also release 2 to 3 more incident neutrons, as you see in the next step. Those 2 to 3 more neutrons go on to hit 2 to 3 more uranium atoms, and they go on to cause fission reactions, and that's the chain reaction, right? If I start with 100 neutrons, and I go through a cycle, and I end with 100 neutrons, that means I'm critical, right? If I'm subcritical, in other words, I start to shut down, I start with 100 neutrons, and I end with 90, right? Now I have 90, now I go to 80, 70, 60, and I'm shutting down. If you're supercritical, when we start up the reactor, we're supercritical. We have 100 to start with, we have 110 to end with, right? So we go 110, 120, and we will level off, call it at 1,000. Now I have 1,000 going in, 1,000 coming out. The reactor is critical. It's a self-sustaining chain reaction. So how do we make that self-sustaining chain reaction? Believe it or not, it is quite difficult to achieve, right? You have to purposefully make that happen. The best example that I can think of is how you build a fire. So you build a fire, you start with your tinder, right? Little leaves, little sticks, right? I was teaching my kids the other day how to build fires, and I thought, this is just like nuclear reaction. You start with a little bit of stuff, then you put your little sticks on, then bigger sticks and everything, right? You make your teepee or your Lincoln log cabin. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. But that stack of wood and sticks will not burn by itself, right? What you have to do is you have to add a match, right? And start that reaction. That's a similar chain reaction. It's a chemical reaction. Ours is the fission reaction. But in our reactor, as we stack the core, as that graphite stack you saw in the video, and we'll show you some more pictures of that, you stack it up and you're effectively building a fire, but you haven't lit a match yet, right? What we do is we have a neutron source, and we add californium. Californium naturally emits neutrons, and that's like lighting a match. So once we get it all stacked up, the whole cover is on, we're ready for operations, right? We lower a little tiny nugget of californium down into the core, and that's like lighting the match. Okay, this supplies the initial burst of neutrons, and then that causes the chain reaction to begin, right? So how do we control that reaction? We do that with control rods. I think that's my next slide, yeah. So this is the reactor vessel. If I speak loud enough, I hope you can hear. I'm gonna walk over here a little bit. So this is the reactor vessel core. Inside of here, we've built our fire, right? And up on top, you see those pipes? Those are control rods. There's 6 control rods on top. We actually only need 2 to keep the reactor shut down. We have a redundancy. You'll notice in our design, if you study it at all, there's a lot of redundancy in every portion of that. So with 6 control rods, there's a 7th pipe right in the middle, and that 7th pipe in the middle has the californium source. That's like our match that we light down into the fire, right? If I want to allow the chain reaction to happen, the control rods are what shuts down the reaction. They're full of boron, and boron has an amazing ability to just absorb neutrons and not care. It just absorbs and absorbs and absorbs, and it shuts down that reaction, right? It's absorbing it, not allowing it to continue the chain reaction. Well, if I pull those control rods up, I set up the conditions where uranium and neutrons can see each other and interact with one another. And as I lower that californium source down in, it provides the initial burst of neutrons and allows it to happen. So you'll see in this little segment, as the control rods are lifted, you'll see the core get hot, right? Kind of turns red and gets hot. And as they are inserted, it shuts down and cools down, right? Does that make sense? So if I want to turn the reactor on, pull control rods up, put my source down in, light it off, right? If I want to shut it down, I simply push the control rods in. If I want to have a higher temperature, I want more fission reactions, right? Because that's where my temperature comes from. Raise the control rods up some. If I want to be colder on the outlet temperature, I simply push them in a little bit. And these are all driven by electric motors. If that electric motor ever loses power for any reason, whether I like hit a scram button, right? The big red button in the control room, I don't want it to be on anymore, or a whole bunch of different automatic features, too high of startup rate, too many neutrons, seismic event, there's a whole host of different things that can shut the reactor down. All it does is simply opens the electrical breakers on the control rod motors, and they have to hold the control rods up. If I turn the power off, they simply let go, and the control rods fall down via gravity. So it's fail-safe, right? If anything happens to the power, or if we just lose power, for example, the reactor shuts itself down. So what do we do with that, right? We make heat. How do we transfer that? Again, the heat is generated in the core. You'll see an inlet and an outlet pipe. The graphic you're going to see will have kind of like blue dots or cold. They go up around the outside of the vessel. Then we push that down into the center of the vessel. It heats up and gets pushed out. So we don't use water for our coolant. We actually use helium, a gas. It is inert. It doesn't become activated. There's a whole bunch of different positive features of helium itself. So as the reactor gets hot, we're pumping that helium around. It goes up the sides of the vessel, goes down through the center, comes out the outlet pipe to the cooler, which is right there. We blow that heat out to the atmosphere, right? And then it goes back around. So that cooler, this little funnel-shaped piece kind of to the right, is where you would attach a steam generator that goes to a turbine, makes electricity, right? Or whatever process you want to have onto that. We're a bit agnostic to what the heat demand is, right? You can make power, you could process heat for a refinery, or you can just simply make synthetic hydrocarbons, right? Which, and we can get into all kinds of technologies that this high temperature gas cooled reactor can activate. So I want to give you some sneak peek internal looks at the core. So this is Frederick on the left here. He's stacking the core. So outside is a bunch of graphite, and internal to that are fuel cells. So right here is a fuel block. This block is about this big, weighs about 80 pounds, and each of these are actually threaded inserts into graphite. So graphite is like pencil lead, right? We use that because it can take an enormous amount of temperature and never melts down, right? Our core is meltdown proof. The fuel which we use is actually a ceramic. So uranium will melt down at about 1,000 to 1,100 Celsius. And that's what's happened at, 3 Mile Island melted down a bit. Chernobyl had a steam explosion, which kind of pushed it all out. That's all metal, right? What we do is we make uranium oxycarbide. We turn it into a ceramic. And I know this is real technical. If you have questions, I'm going to have a whole section for questions afterwards. Or if you have questions now, feel free to raise your hand. This is just a discussion. We make it a ceramic, suffice it to say. We put it into a ceramic form because that's like trying to melt a coffee cup, right? We can go well above 2,600 degrees Celsius before we even have like a crack or a mechanical failure, let alone a meltdown. I don't even know what the meltdown temperature is, several thousand degrees Celsius, right? So that's why the Department of Energy, anyone who has ever done research and tried to really fail this fuel has called it meltdown proof because it's a ceramic. And you're trying to melt a rock. For perspective, lava is 1,200 Celsius. And our fuel doesn't even care to even expand or crack until 2,600 Celsius. And worst case scenarios, if everything goes wrong on our core, potentially, right, we have to do hypothetical analyses, we only get to 1,400 Celsius, about half of the temperature that would cause like a mechanical crack into one of these little nuggets. So again, our whole core is a different design than what you would traditionally think of a light water or pressurized water reactor. That's like a Gen 1 reactor. We're actually Gen 4. So think about a computer that used to take up like the size of this building, had a ton of water cooling, right, all these electrical circuits, and now we have more compute power in your pocket in your phone. Right, that's the generations that we're talking about. That's why we want to rapidly iterate on the mechanical hardware, because you learn so much about it by actually building the thing that you want to operate. Okay, so and then the middle piece is just a fuel block being flown in. We have it on a crane, and we individually put those into the core. And that's us building the fire, right? That's stacking up the logs in the tinder, and before we put the source in. So this is the outside of the core. That on the left-hand side, well, is that your right-hand side, sorry. On the right-hand side, that's a control rod drive unit. So this is the mechanical motor I was speaking of, right? And this chain going down holds that control rod. The control rod is about this tall. Looks kind of like sausage links. I don't know if you can see these. These are all the control rods here. There's 6 of them. As they insert into the core, they absorb neutrons and shut down the reaction. Another point I want to make here is that the main goal and priority of Valor Atomics is to maintain personnel, public, and the environment safe, right? And we do that in a whole variety of ways. But we can't be successful if we hurt people on the job, right? That's any industry. We won't be successful if we're hurting the community, and we will not be successful for hurting the environment, right? I like to remind our employees that we want to decide when we're in the news, right? Not happen to be in the news because of something we did wrong, right? So we choose when to be there. So you saw in the video that were some concrete blocks were poured, and this right here is called shielding. That's how we reduce the exposure of radiation to workers and the general public. So there's 80 inches of concrete. And concrete's a bit of a misnomer. It's much more dense than that. As you do the fission reaction, there are neutrons and gamma rays that are coming out, which if they were to interact with your body, may be detrimental, right? So we put a bunch of concrete in between us and the reactor so that it interacts with rocks and sand and iron ore particles and everything like that before it ever comes out to the people spaces and interacts with the human being. So that's the shielding blocks. And that's actually one of the only unique designs of this whole reactor that hasn't been proven technology from the 50s is our shielding design. So the way that we can go fast and stay safe, people ask us this all the time. It's like, you're moving too fast to be safe. Well, we manufacture things externally to the actual job site and bring them in and put them together. So those blocks that you saw on the video were actually manufactured up in Salt Lake City by Olympus Casting, I believe it was, and trucked down to us, and then we stacked them like Lego blocks. They fit together perfectly. So instead of a 30-day activity building up big forms, potentially hurting people on the job site, whatever, it's a lot of coordinated activity. all we did is set up a crane and we stacked our blocks in a couple of days. So that makes us go extremely fast while maintaining the safety and maintaining personnel, public, and environmental safety. Let's see if I can go to the next slide. Maybe. So let's talk about way back when, concept to thermal prototype. It took about 10 months to go from this drawing to manufacturing our pressure vessel. So this was down in California. I'm really proud to say that I can't think of almost anything that was not American made in this entire process, because we want to bring onshore. We want to onshore industry back to America. A point I want to make here is you'll look at the core design. You'll see in a few different pictures that there's a few different designs here. And the beauty of being able to rapidly iterate through hardware is to find the slight errors and find modifications you can make to make them even better. So you'll see there's a whole bunch of little holes drilled here, and then you see big holes in this one. So this is a different separate test for different thermal, chemical, and mechanical characteristic testing to be able to rapidly iterate through different core designs without ever having uranium fuel in it, because it makes it much more difficult once it has uranium fuel into it. And after 10 months, we had a thermal prototype. So this is about where I got involved with the company, and we started to test this reactor with electric resistive heaters instead of uranium. So again, if there's any errors in pressure, in temperature, in flow rates, they're easily changed out, right? So we did a couple months of testing in Los Angeles with this, and then shipped it over to Utah. So our groundbreakings was September 11th of last year. As many of you remember, the Santa Fe Energy Lab, the patch that we're on was just a sagebrush. It was the old central warehouse. We actually had some drag chain that we had to move out of the way. There were some coal mill parts and things like that we had to move out. There was a small coal pile. So we went from bare dirt to an operating reactor in just a few short months. Because again, our mindset is mass manufacturability, and we have to keep that in mind. Our initial criticality was back in November. This is at the Nevada National Security Site. That's why this is pretty much the only 3 pictures that exist of this, because it is a national security site. You can't take your phone in there. You can't take a camera in there. This was taken by somebody else there. And that was taking one fuel block and testing it to validate our physics models and our neutronics models. So at the same time that we're manufacturing and building the dirt work in Emery County is the same time that we're manufacturing the concrete shielding blocks in Salt Lake City, is the same time that we're testing criticality down in Nevada, and is the same time that I'm out in Los Angeles thermally testing the prototype out in Los Angeles. So all these things are going on concurrently and adding into the design in small changes. Then the reactor transport was about February of this year. So we had a crazy idea to fly this thing from Los Angeles to Utah, and the Department of War got excited about it, and they gave us permission to do it. And so we were able to get on 3 C-17s and work with the Department of War, the Air Force, and some other entities to make this happen. Super cool project, and just proved, and we were able to show some American superiority and dominance and prove that the United States can rapidly deploy a nuclear reactor to anywhere in the planet within a short few hours. And true to our promise, we promised Utah that we would deliver a reactor. And as we were driving through town, we thought, you know what, we're going to take it straight up to the Capitol and put it on their front steps and just show them, like, hey, thank you, Utah. We love being here. Here's the reactor that we promised to do. So many companies will come in, and I'm sure the commissioners can attest to this, and they will promise you the world, right? We're going to do all these cool things, and they never do it. As Valor Atomics, I like that we really try to under-promise and over-deliver on everything that we do. Here's the War 250 site. I can't tell you how many thousands of yards, several thousand yards of concrete we've bought from Nelson Construction and Price. There were several days, even actually this pour, we got every concrete truck that was available from Kanab to Spanish Fork to come to Emery County and Carbon counties and just run circles to make a continuous pour to our reactor pad. And we'll probably do that again here shortly. We're doing another one. So, and then the building came up. Okay, move on from this. Oh, the point I wanted to make here, you'll see that this says control server. Built and tested in Los Angeles and simply shipped here, put on a pad, hook up the electronics, and it's ready to go. So that's one of the ways that we can go fast. And that's simply lifting the reactor into place after it was shipped inside of our building. So criticality was achieved, again, in June of this year. This man on the right-hand side is from the Department of Energy in Washington, D.C., and came out to present us a plaque and some appreciation from President Trump, congratulating us on achieving his executive order. I suppose I didn't speak of that much. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the executive order that was given. President Trump asked a handful of companies, Valor Atomics included, to have a program that could safely and efficiently go critical outside the national lab system before the 4th of July of 2026. And we're the only one, I think we're the only one to have actually achieved that. There were 3 others that went critical before the 4th of July. They were within the national lab system. Not to speak poorly of that, you know what I mean, that's amazing that we're reinvigorating and having a nuclear renaissance right now. But Valor Atomics really stepped up to say, we want to do this as he intended, outside of the national lab system, and not take advantage of all those things because we want the learnings ourselves to operate safely. So I've got a couple more videos I'd like to show, but I'd also like to open this up to some questions. What do you want to know about nuclear power? What are your constituents, your neighbors? You know, what do they want to know? I know there's no questions about coal, but we've had coal for a few decades, but nuclear is new. There's got to be several questions out here. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Maybe just the removal of the waste.
The removal of the waste. So your question is, what do we do with the fuel after it's spent? Is that your question? So the fuel in Ward 250, we're actually kind of leasing, I guess you would call it, from the Department of Energy, and they will take that fuel back after Ward 250 is complete. Yeah, great question. Any other questions? Yes?
Yes, where do we go from here?
So the question is, I'll just repeat them. I'm sure that over here we can't hear it. Where do we go from here? What is the future? Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay. So the question of where do we go from here is a great question. It's a super exciting one. So we've already broken ground on our next reactor building. Again, that's why I said we're going to be pouring a lot of concrete here shortly in the next short months. And where do we go from here? We love Carbon and Emery counties. This is our home. We want to stay here. We are looking for large sections of land to be able to build in the future. That's what it's going to require for like the operation, or excuse me, not Operation Gigawatt, for giga sites. Sorry, somebody else is going to, I read this as I looked down. Someone else is going to talk about Operation Gigawatt. Our business model is one such that we would create or manufacture, let me back up. Have a tract of land, make a manufacturing plant, similar to the Intermount Electronics, right? Like these big buildings where we manufacture reactors and we actually manufacture the fuel to go in them as well. And we don't transport them hundreds of miles, thousands of miles. We want to drag them a half a mile on the same property, right? And set them up and start stacking reactors to power big industries like a refinery, like a data center, like a concrete manufacturing, synthetic hydrocarbons. It's not beyond the possibility also to just stack reactors and have a power purchase agreement with Rocky Mountain Power, push it onto the grid. Again, we're kind of agnostic. We want to sell electrons. We want to make electricity dirt cheap to where it's like, why would we meter it? Because it's so inexpensive is kind of the goal, right? So does that answer your question, Ms. Patsy? Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
So what size do you want, this microgrid to be?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I failed to mention that. So this reactor that we're operating right now, we operate it at 100 kilowatts. The form factor can take it up to 5 megawatts. Excuse me. The next reactor will probably be around the 40 megawatt scale thermal, which will give you about 25 megawatts electric per unit. And so when you say like, what are we trying to get to like on a form of like 100 megawatts or 1,000 megawatts? Or is that what your question is? Yeah. Yeah, whatever the demand is, I guess, right? There's a supply and demand question. Our goal is to make one reactor every couple of days, right? Like on a mass manufacturing basis. Again, like I said, the AP1000s are like these Ford, like a Ferrari or F1 race car or whatever. And we want to make like the Ford Ranger version of that, where it's super reliable, dirt cheap, and mass manufacturable, right? And there's no reason we couldn't. It's just, again, a piece of hardware that the things that you make infrequently tend to be very costly, very difficult to build. A lot of like one-off, manufacturing makes it very expensive and difficult. However, the things that you make frequently, you can make a very high quality because you can like really fine-tune those processes. And that which you make frequently and of high quality, you can make inexpensively because you're not buying one piece, right? You're not buying this one-off part. You're buying thousands of those parts. Anyway, it's an economy of scale. And so we would stack those reactors based on the amount of demand. And we know that the demand of power, again, supply and demand of power over the next several decades, I foresee this being hopefully hundreds of reactors, right? Or not, if not here, then somewhere,
So if I was an operator coming out of a coal plant, could I learn how to run one of these?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're 90% a power company and 10% a nuclear company. So the neutronics portion of that, you probably wouldn't know. However, we would train you up on that. Right? I know you're an operator of a power plant, and we've had lots of operators come and say, well, I don't have any nuclear experience. It doesn't matter. The trend is your friend, right? As we like to say in operations. So if you can understand a trend and you can learn a little bit of nuclear physics and how the fission reaction works, and how if you learn your piece of equipment well, then you can operate this plant. Yeah. Yep. And we have hired, like Sunnyside Cogen shut down. We hired some operators from there. We've taken one operator came out of the National Lab System where she operated a different type of reactor, but again, you learn. And she had 90% of the nuclear part of it and 10% of the operations, and so we were able to integrate her into our system. And then we've taken some college graduates, and they're excellent as well. So, you know what I mean, just a really wide breadth of experience for who's been operating our plants, and they have to pass very rigorous training program to be able to operate it, and they're checked off, you know what I mean? Anyway, it's very similar to the training program of the power plant. You have to learn a system and then show someone that you know the system and move back and forth like that.
So the goal of your company is to build these and then sell them to different customers, like Tri-City. I mean, they're a municipality. You would sell that to and operate, train them up. Is that to
Potentially, however, the current thought is that we would sell electrons. Right? We will own them, operate them, maintain them, refuel them, and we would just sell the power for that.
okay?
I think, again, this is like fire and shoulder, 20 years down the line, I think that we will prove that nuclear is so safe and operable that anybody can buy them. I mean, a municipality, a power plant, or whatever, can buy one of these and can operate it. But currently, and correct me if I'm wrong, we are in the business of selling the power, not necessarily the unit itself. Yeah, great question. Yes, in fact.
How often do you have to replace the Californian rod?
Never. Yeah, it's good for the life of the plant. Its half-life, I believe, is 2.7 years or so, but that only means that it loses half of its activity over that 2.5 years, right? Then it would take another 2.5 years to lose the other half, and now down to a quarter. But either way, it supplies sufficient neutrons to start that chain reaction. One point I didn't make is that in a nuclear reactor, if I was to start it up and shut it down and come back a couple hours later, there's still a neutron population there. So it's kind of like when you build a fire. I'm going to go back to the fire analogy. If I build a fire and let it burn overnight, right, and the coals are still there, I can throw some sticks on it, it goes up again, right? So there's neutron population still in the core. I can start it up off of that. But generally speaking, the Californium, it actually stays in the core for the duration of the life. And it's not unreasonable to think that if we were to retire a War 250, we could take this Californium source and use it in future reactors. Because it does last years and years and years and years. And you don't need that much of a surge of neutrons to start the chain reaction.
So then what is, you said you lease the fuel from the DOE and they come and take the waste. So what are they coming to take if you don't have to replace that rod?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good distinction. So the Californium is actually a little piece about this big. The fuel blocks are about 80 pounds. They're a block of graphite, and inside of those are fuel that's stacked. So they would take the fuel block itself. We have 24 fuel blocks that are stacked inside of the core. So they would take the 24 fuel blocks back. That's what they're taking back, is the fuel section of that. The Californium is just like the spark that starts the fire. It's a different piece.
Okay, so how long do the fuel blocks last then?
Good question. So reactors are, it's kind of like your gas meter. We call it effective full power days. So if I was to run it at 100% power, how long would I be able to run it at 100% power? Because if I run, so we have 30 days of fuel, 30 days, right? 1 month of fuel. Now, if I run at 50% power, that means I can go 60 days, right? So I'm burning it up slowly. Quarter would be 120 days, right? So if you run different testing campaigns, we expect it to last about a year and a half for our testing campaigns. So that is only for this reactor. So it's kind of like taking a big semi, it's this huge machine, and putting a squirt of fuel in it, right, just to test it and move on to the next one. So we have 30 effective full power days of operation, and that'll last us a year and a half, and then it'll be out of fuel, and either we'll refuel, retire it in place, give it back to the Department of Energy, what have you. So currently, they own the fuel, and so they would be taking it back at the end of that testing campaign, which again, 12 to 18 months is what we expect it to take to burn that fuel up. Great questions. There was a question over here. Oh yeah, okay, Christian in the back.
Yesterday, I spent some time with Jeremy Pearson, that many of us know, and we had a faculty candidate for our energy engineering program. And he specializes in, and Jess is really interested in, the spent fuel. Because there's a lot of value in the spent fuel. It's not just something, right, like eggshells, right, that you throw away in the garbage after you eat the egg or something like that. But
Yeah.
But I'm curious, once you get up to speed, you're going to be going through a lot of fuel, right? Creating a lot of spent waste. And is there interest in Valor Atomics in continuing to process that fuel through other means to extract the other opportunities in the spent fuel? Or is that something you're just going to let go to somebody else?
So the question is, will we be recycling fuel? Like if I was just like shorten that up, is that your question?
Yeah, basically, we'll have other opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about TRISO fuel, which is what we use, and traditional nuclear reactor fuel. So traditional reactors are in a cylindrical metal sleeve, and that actually generates hoop stress, right? It wants to like rip itself apart because it pressurizes that rod. As you fission, anyway, so going back a bit to the physics, as you fission uranium, it releases a little bit of gas as well, and so it pressurizes that rod. So traditional nuclear power plants can only burn up about 4 to 5% of the actual energy within that fuel rod. So 95+% of the energy in that rod is still there when we call it spent fuel. I like to call it lightly used fuel. Like we should be recycling all that fuel. The stuff that's sitting in a water bath for the next 20 years or whatever should be recycled because there's so much energy there. Also, Idaho National Labs, I've seen with my own eyes in their big hot cell. They're kind of the leading edge on that. They chop up the fuel rods, do electrochemical processing, and grab the fuel out of that is not spent. That lightly used fuel. They can actually recycle that and reuse it, and certainly we should be doing that. One of the reasons we chose our design is that we can actually use about 4 times as much energy out of the fuel as a traditional nuclear power plant. So our little pellets of fuel, we can burn up to 18 to 20% of that energy out of them. And so again, right there alone, we're using up 4x amount of energy out of the fuel itself. Now, I don't know that we've explored any option to recycle that fuel, to powderize it and regain it. Correct me if I'm wrong. But also, as you have more of an industry, success begets success, right? There becomes, as many of you know in business, if I have a successful business, it spawns off all these different businesses. And so, yes, certainly that should be pursued. And I think that either Valor Atomics or someone else will pick up that industry, and really the heavy hitter for that market would be all the spent fuel from traditional nuclear power plants. It'd be easier to harvest, and it'd be easier to manufacture and process, and there's just a lot more there, right? There's 4 times more energy in the, again, lightly used fuel than what would be in our fuel itself. Does that answer your question? So it's kind of a nebulous. In Valor Atomics, we don't have a specific path to recycling fuel. However, if we were to make hundreds of reactors and we have piles of spent fuel, it probably makes sense to go in there and grind it up and reuse it. So thank you. Sir?
Yes. When I was at the launch party the other day, I was talking to a bunch of the Valor guys, and they're like, we're trying to market this. So in the end, you built one, but you got to sell it, right? We got to have a buyer of it. I think what you just told Mike is that you guys aren't going to sell it. You're going to put them in and sell the power. But either way, whether you sell the whole unit to a Price City, or whether you bring it over to Price City and sell the power, there's an economic problem there, right? Or else you'd have a whole bunch of orders right now. So what's the cost compared to currently on the open market to, if you're selling the power, what's the cost for you guys to produce the power versus what's on the open market right now? Or what's the cost of one of these units? Because, we got the one running. We want you to sell 100 of these, in the next year, but you haven't yet. So what's the economics there? Are we waiting for gas and coal costs to go up high enough that nuclear is justified? Because I understand what you're saying. Once you build a whole bunch of these, they become cheap. But you can't build a whole bunch of these until you sell them, right? And you can't sell them until gas and coal are gone,
bit of a chicken and the egg scenario,
they're so
right?
cheap. So it's that's the problem with our area is we produce very cheap coal with gas or very cheap electricity with coal and gas, which makes nuclear unjustified because it costs more right now. So how do we flip that to where nuclear actually is a viable competitor to coal and gas? And we hope it's not that we regulate the heck out of coal so that it's too expensive to do
No, that's
coal
not the
because we're a
idea.
coal area. So what's the economics here?
Yeah, great question. So the question you're asking, it's called levelized cost of electrical energy, LCOE. So what is the LCOE is the short question that you're asking. So they will be predicted about the same as natural gas coming out, and that's the first iteration, right? So not only are we like competitive within the market, it's not as cheap as coal, right? But to have your first like commercial unit out comparable to something that's already being commercially available and used is pretty fantastic, right? Because it will only go cheaper from there as you mass manufacture these. So also, speaking of LCOE, that's only one metric of nuclear power that we think of with a high temperature gas reactor, because 2/3 of our energy as we use as human beings is hydrocarbons, and the other 1/3 is electrical power, generally speaking. So we're only talking about the 1/3 electrical energy demand, right? We're not talking about synthetic hydrocarbons, right? Which every vehicle on the planet can be nuclear powered because we can synthetically create diesel fuel, jet fuel, gasoline, whatever, using the high heat thermolysis and a couple other chemical processes with the heat from the reactor. But then also, if you take a power plant and go direct to the source, right, direct to the refinery, instead of shipping electrical power over grid, the line losses, and can bring it back to heat to do the refining process. If you were to set one up, say because the rail line's coming down from the Uinta Basin, right, comes to the rail spur in Price. Say we set up a refinery there and heat it with nuclear heat instead of going, chemical, mechanical to electrical back to heat, right? All those losses along the way. If we go direct to the source, now I'm cutting out the LCOE because it's not a levelized cost of electrical energy anymore. It's just heat energy. So there's a lot of different markets out there. We do. Oh, lost my mic again. Maybe. Oh, there it's back. We generally do speak of electrical because that's what most people know of. However, there are tons of different applications to this. And that's one of the reasons, besides safety, reliability, mass manufacturability of the high temperature gas cooled reactor, the high temperature part of that is key. The entering argument to make money is to boil water, which is you can do that on your stovetop, right? But when you can go up to like 900 Celsius, right? 100 Celsius is boiling water. If you can go 9 times that, you can do some really interesting chemical processes that are already out there, and they're using electricity. Cost effective to just go straight to the source of the heat. Do you want to add anything to the business of that?
In the beginning, we have to build a lot of these to drive that cost down. And so part of the reason that we talk about looking for large tracts of land is that on those large tracts of land, we can start to put down the nth reactor, and that nth reactor allows us to amortize the cost of all of them over a larger period or a larger space and larger period of time. So the first 5 are going to be really expensive, but when you get to 8, 9, 10 and thereon, we start to drive down that LCOE over time, and then we start to get into the other interesting stuff you talked about. We're not just looking at the cost of the electricity, we're looking at the cost of the heat before it actually goes onto the grid, for example.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I would imagine when you first started setting up fiber lines, you're charging way less than it costs to put them in until you have a base of market, like he said, over a whole bunch of different people where you're all together and sharing in that cost. Mr. Mike?
So I think to this whole conversation is
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so part of the reason Isaiah set out to build this company and the way we've designed the reactor, the way we want to manufacture them, the way we are manufacturing them, is when you can do it at a smaller scale, number one, you can factory produce it. The reason these reactors are the size that they are is that we can actually make them in America. We don't have to forge the vessels overseas. We can roll this plate in our factory in Los Angeles, for example. We can do that at scale. And so the actual expensive part of nuclear historically has not, for us, been the concrete, the graphite, or the steel. It's the licensing, it's the fence line, it's the regulatory. And so if you do that once in one large location and you can factory manufacture these facilities or components, we can drive down the cost across that supply chain for us and then mass manufacture them. So it's this combination, it's this confluence of all of these factors together that allow us to drive this cost down over time. But the speed piece is the faster we iterate, we learn every time. And if you can learn faster, we can drive down the cost faster. And then we innovate on our manufacturing process. That confluence allows us to go really fast, make a lot of energy, and then do it in one location, and it provides value to that entire region.
And also, you said we have to sell this reactor that we've built. We're not selling it to anybody, right? We've sold it to investors, right? They're buying portions of the company in equity, whether it be a debt option or an equity option. And so, what was it, last Monday? I think we closed our round B funding for $1 billion of investment, right? And so that's who's funding the first several reactors. They're taking the risk. These venture capitalists and other investors are taking the risk on these first several reactors, and that's how we fund them, because we're not, again, the first 4 or 5 we build will not be sold, right? By 5, 6, 7, then we'll be in the mass manufacturing realm. And I'm just kind of throwing out a number. Maybe it's 8, maybe it's 10, I don't know. Maybe it's 4, maybe we get it right by the 4th one, right? Where we can mass manufacture them and build them at an economy of scale that makes sense to be selling to whomever it may be. These are great questions. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
So how big is a reactor?
How big is a reactor? Is that your question? Mm-hmm. Great question. So how big is a reactor? It would fit in this part of the room is a reactor. So this reactor that you're seeing on the screen, the concrete is what we're seeing here, but it is about 8 feet by 8 feet by 20 feet. It fits within the 20-foot shipping container. That's how big that is. So our next reactor will probably be about 14 feet in diameter and about 30 feet tall. But that's about as big as we're going to get, because like he said, we want to manufacture these in America and in a factory. And about 14 feet is how big the plates, anyway, it goes back from the engineering of it, right? The plate still has got to be about that thick. That's how big we can roll it in a manufacturing process and seam weld it and still be a Section 8 pressure vessel. Anyway, we follow all the codes and regulations as we should, and that gets us to about 14 feet in diameter. And also that makes it so we can still ship it over rail or over land. You know, it gets a little bit more difficult than a regular standard shipping container, but you can select your routes and get permits to ship something 14 feet in diameter.
So I'm still kind of stuck on the waste question.
Yeah, sure.
Would you like pull the graphite rods out and recycle them? I mean, replace them, or do you just throw the whole thing away because you're mass producing them and it's just easier to start new?
Yeah.
What's the thought?
So every nuclear reactor in the country, kind of in the world, some places do recycling, but back to this recycling question, it would be a once-through use. So you pull the graphite blocks out and you would store that fuel.
So you've got some mechanism where a machine can go in there and do that.
Potentially. So there is an allowable amount of radiation that a person can be exposed to. Like when you go to the dentist, you get radiation. When you walk outside, you get radiation, right, from the cosmic rays of the sun and all this stuff. If you're a smoker, you get like 100 times radiation than what you'd ever get at a nuclear power plant. So we could have a whole like exposure, radiation type discussion on that. What's that? Exactly. Everything is very regulated, as it should be, right? So we're not overexposing people. But especially for the first few, like we're fully planning on mechanizing it. However, for the first few, like this Ward 250 reactor, it'll probably be a person, and you screw in eye bolts to it. It's very low-level radiation, right? There's ways to reduce your radiation. Time, distance, and shielding are different ways that you can reduce that, right? So you'd be very efficient in what you're doing. We've made special tools that you can go in, and so instead of going down in the core and screwing it in, right, you'd reach from a long reach position to increase that distance and spend less time and clip it in, right? And now I can pull that block out, and you put it in a shielded container. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of different ways. This is nothing new, right? They've been doing this since the 50s and before. As soon as like Madame Curie, when she died of like radiation exposure, like they started figuring this out, right? That radiation's bad for a person if you're overexposed, but within the federal limits, and we set our limits lower than the federal limits, then it's acceptable. Yeah. How interested is the military in our product? Interested enough that they took a 5-year process and let us do it in a shorter time than that. So that being said, like there are great military applications. We certainly don't have like a contract. Right? We have like we're going to deliver. There's in remote areas. This is a fantastic technology. So this series, this Ward series, that fits within a shipping container, there's no reason why you couldn't put another one on a C-17 and fly it to a forward operating base, or put it up in Alaska, in the middle of nowhere, and provide 5 megawatts of power to that area. So there are applications. We've been approached by people in foreign countries where there's like refineries and gas and oil, any manufacturing, where they're like, hey, this foreign country has a terrible power grid. We spend more downtime just because of the power grid than we do on mechanical failures. Like, can we get a dozen of these reactors to power our operations in these other countries? And anyway, they're not yet, obviously, right? But and we've been approached by all kinds of different industries for the portability of these reactors, to be able to just put them somewhere and have a stable, reliable, affordable supply of power. I probably have time for like 2 more questions, if there are any more. I don't want to take, I'll talk. We're here, by the way, the rest of the day, during the break and after. We were up till, last night with the Orangeville community, talking nuclear power. We talk it all day, every day. So happy to keep talking, but I'll save some time.
So probably 2 questions on this. The Hunter and Huntington power plants generate about 2.5 gigawatts of power, have the capacity there. Your model is going to be able to generate about 25 megawatts. You need about 100 units to meet the equivalent capacity there. Are you limited? So once you're in containment, how often how long can the unit run before you have to change out fuel or take things apart? Because 100 units, maintenance, durability, interested in the life there. And then is the limiting factor the manufacturing for being able to size the vessels for 25 megawatt capacity?
We could certainly make them bigger, but then it makes it cost more and it's more difficult. So when you have small pieces, again, 14 foot is like our biggest component. Everything else is smaller than that. As you get up in size, so like, again, we'll go back to the AP1000s. There's like 2 places on the planet, Japan and Taiwan, what is it? Korea, yeah, like Japan and Korea, that can forge those pressure vessels. So you're beholden to 2 locations in the planet, and they have to go on the slow boat across. And so if you want a pressure vessel, you're waiting a couple of years. If we want a pressure vessel, we will buy a piece of plate steel a few inches thick, roll it, and seam weld it in a week or whatever, right? And so as it gets bigger, it gets more complicated. And so we're trying to keep it within that form factor where it's mass manufacturable. What was your first question? Sorry. Oh, how long does it last? Yes. Yeah, so it depends. So that's kind of we talk a lot in Valor Atomics about now, next, and later. Now is what we're working on. Next is kind of like around the lunch table, and later is like, you're having drinks with somebody and you can talk about later stuff. That's kind of a later question. In theory, correct me if I'm wrong, it would be a few years, for each one of these units. It makes the most sense to do that, 2 to 5, 7 years. Ideally, it's forever, but you're limited by fuel, you're limited by other constraints, as many people know within engineering. You got to work within a box. If I only have this much volume and I have to put this much fuel in it, it's only going to last, however many years that is. It's certainly not like a monthly basis you'd have to shut off, but it's probably not 20 years, right? Like military applications, submarines, aircraft carriers, they're like a 20-year lifespan, but they can also get fuel that is no joke, right? We have this really, really diluted fuel between 5 and 19.9%. In military applications, you can go way above 19.9%. And so it's just energy density. Sorry, I don't know if that answers your question at all, yeah. I would suspect it's more than 2 years. But yeah, it'd be on the years basis. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to do it on a monthly basis. And if you have 100 units, now I have a very proficient maintenance team. I've developed systems. Like right now, sorry, I keep pointing to the picture here. Those Lego blocks, right? We could, in 8 or 12 hours, we can uncover the top of the core, maybe another shift to open it up and another shift to defuel it. Like it's a several-day process, not like several months or a year to refuel a plant. Yeah, great questions. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm kind of out of time. I wanted to end with one quote from our Secretary of Department of Energy, and see if I can skip over to it or not without watching all these videos, even though the videos are great. I encourage you to go online to YouTube and others and watch some of those videos. Oh no, I went too far now. There we go. So this is from Department of Energy, right? It's not just who can turn on a reactor, right? It's who will build the infrastructure to power the country. The people and the actual business of nuclear, not theory. That's who's going to win. And I appreciate that we are here in Carbon and Emery. We are investing in the land, and guess what? The people are already here, right? We have people that already run power plants. You already understand pressure vessels. We already understand, code compliant repairs. We appreciate Carbon and Emery counties. We love being here. And again, for the future basis, we're looking for a tract of land to mass manufacture these, right? We would like to have a symbiotic relationship with Intermountain Electronics. We supply the power. They have the backup power. All this stuff is available in Carbon and Emery counties. I really appreciate the time today. Again, we're here for the rest of the day. Please feel free to ask us questions. If there are other questions later, reach out to us. And that's all I have. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jess. I'm sure we're all very inspired and curious and ready to share our ideas. So let's have a short networking break for 10-ish minutes. Snacks outside, come back, and we'll get back to OED's update. Thanks, guys. Welcome back. I hope you guys had a great networking session. We can talk more after our final talk. Our last speaker is Sydney Eckhart, and she is going to update us on progress toward Operation Gigawatt. So how are we taking all of these different energies and putting them together in a growing energy portfolio to sustain Utah's growth? So thank you. Here's Cindy.
I feel like following Valor is a pretty tough act to follow. I should have gotten up half an hour earlier this morning. My name is Cindy Eckhart. I'm with the Office of Energy Development. I am our data scientist and also our tribal liaison. I love questions as we go, but we can also kind of hold them to the end. I'm excited to meet everyone here. I love coming to Carbon and Emery County. You guys have been doing energy forever. You are the heartbeat of Utah, and so I'm excited to be here. So let's start with Operation Gigawatt. In October 2024, Governor Cox announced an initiative to double energy capacity in the state of Utah in 10 years. So if you consider this system that it took us 100 years to build, and he wanted to do it again in 10 years, it's a pretty ambitious initiative. And at the time, I think a lot of people thought, wait, what? Why? What's the big deal? And now, in 2026, I think we all look around and know that energy is fundamental to economic development, to winning the race to re-onshore a lot of our manufacturing. I think sometimes people think about doubling energy and they go straight to data centers. Oh, but I'm not sure about data centers. But it's not just about data centers. It's about our population growth. It's about attracting more people to Utah. It is about onshoring manufacturing. It's about mining and milling. And so this was sort of the mission that was given to the Office of Energy Development. Yeah, see, Jade? No, my clicker's not. Oh, it is. Okay, phew. Okay. So there were 4 pillars, right? I think everybody kind of has heard, hopefully, of Operation Gigawatt. No, we're going to double in 10 years. But there was more to it than that. And it had sort of these 4 pillars, and I'm going to talk about all of them. But it was about increasing transmission capacity. It's one thing to make the power. It's a totally different thing to get the power where you need it. The second is expanding energy production. We want more of it. I think Utah is really known as an any of the above state, and honestly, I think it served us really well. I spend a lot of time in my job talking to other states, and this has served us really well. So now we're moving on from any of the above to more of the above, and that's that second pillar. The third is making sure that Utah's policies are pro-business, pro-energy, pro-consumer. There's so much we can do to influence the federal government, but there's a lot we can do about Utah, and that was definitely a mission that we were given. And the fourth pillar is talking about innovation and research, so I'm going to give a 20-minute presentation about what's happening with Valor Atomics. I'm absolutely kidding. I'm not going to talk about Valor Atomics. So let's talk about transmission a little bit. I think something that people miss a little bit about transmission is a team game. The grid is a team game. Power doesn't stop at the border of Utah. We send power to Idaho, who sends power to Oregon. We get a lot of wind power from Wyoming. We all participate in energy markets, and we need to be able to get the power where it needs to be for the lowest price. So in July 2026, there were 11 Western governors led by our Governor Cox, who signed on to this study that's called the Western Transmission Expansion Coalition. The short name is WestTech. They put together a 10-year plan that we as Western states can agree on to move the power where it needs to be. And so these 11 governors, bipartisan governors, came together and signed on to this plan and created a task force to make sure that we're working together. At the same time, the Office of Energy Development realizes that the purview that we have, what we can influence, is here in Utah. So we are also putting together a study that focuses on just the state of Utah. Let's make sure that if Valor gets their energy production going in Orangeville, how are they going to get their energy out? How are they going to get their electricity out? So those are scenarios that we're thinking about. So we've kind of put together 4 scenarios that cover the breadth of things that might happen in Utah to make sure that we're ready to meet the demand. These are not short-term projects. This is not something that you can say, oh, next year I'm going to do this huge transmission line. These are 10 and 15-year projects. So we really have to be forward-thinking about that. The second pillar is production. Since January of 2025, in Utah, we've added 925 megawatts of solar and 920 megawatts of storage. I actually was kind of surprised when I saw that number. So the cool thing about battery storage is you can make power when it's cheap in the middle of the day and then sell power later when it's super expensive. So those are some things that we've done from a production standpoint. And this is pretty tiny font. This is a bunch of the energy policy that has been implemented in the state. And I know that our amazing legislators have come and talked about the legislative session, so I'm not going to go through each of these individually. There's a couple that I want to point out. There's a House concurrent resolution about nuclear manufacturing. One of the things I want to talk about today is that nuclear is not just power. There's an entire ecosystem around it that the state of Utah is committed to supporting. And that concurrent resolution from the House is supporting that nuclear manufacturing. On the Senate side, I'm bringing up SB 132, even though it's from 2025. SB 132 allows large industrial users to bring their own power. And that does 2 super important things. One is it makes Utah very pro-business. If businesses want to come to Utah and they want it bad enough to bring their own power, they have the capability to do that. And the second thing it does is it protects ratepayers. I think everyone is seeing out there that electricity rates are going up because of these large users. And we don't want Utah ratepayers to bear the burden of these large industrial users. I bring it up again just because lots of states have seen that we led the way on this and have copied this legislation. If you Google it, it's a lot of places. So Utah really led the way on that. The second one from the Senate, of course, is the nuclear energy concurrent resolution. So we've got an energy one from the Senate and a nuclear manufacturing from the House. But I can't speak to all of these. I will let our smart legislators speak to those. The last pillar that I want to spend most of the time on is this pillar of innovation and research. So there were a couple of resources that were really called out in the governor's initiative, and they were geothermal and nuclear. We like these. They're clean. They're base load. They're new, so they need some support from the state. How much time do I have? I feel like I don't want to talk about this too much. Okay, but all right. What is changing really fundamentally in geothermal power production right now is that we are leveraging everything that we've learned from our oil and gas fracking technology. So we're taking that incredible depth of knowledge that the United States crushes on, right? We are by far the leader of that, and we're using it to do geothermal power plants. For advanced geothermal, what they're doing is they're going down 10,000 feet, they're going horizontal 5,000 feet, they're fracking the rock, they're able to pump down cool water, bring it back up hot, and make power from that. So that's what we're calling advanced geothermal. Enhanced geothermal uses a similar technology. We go down, we go out, but instead of fracking the rock and using that as our heating source, they're building in a closed loop system. So think about a radiator, right? And they're pumping down a working fluid. It doesn't use water, and working fluid is often like butane. They pump that down, they pass it through the hot rock, pass it through the hot rock, and it comes up hot, and they make power from that. So we're really at the forefront of that in Utah. Oh, was that funny? Okay, I feel like I just, okay, anyway. So one of the things that I think we've done super well, if you talk to any of the geothermal developers in Utah, and you say, what can we do? What can we do to get out of your way? They'll say, we tell every other state to copy and paste what Utah's doing from a state perspective. Like we have done that right, and so thank you again to our legislators. But what I really want to spend most of my time talking about, and I realize I'm between everyone and lunch, is the efforts that we've done around nuclear. Obviously, our friends at Valor have presented. I apologize that I don't have cool videos to show, and it's kind of tough. I really want to talk about our nuclear education campaign that the Office of Energy Development is developing. I want to talk about the manufacturing campus. So again, it's not just about power, the nuclear ecosystem. And then most importantly, I want to talk about the concept of a nuclear life cycle innovation campus. I heard some people concerned about what are we doing with this spent nuclear fuel? And we're hoping that Utah has a solution for that too. And I kind of wanted to put this in here just to, again, really focus on nuclear ecosystem. Okay, who's seen this billboard? Oh, good. Okay, I'm very glad to know that you have seen this billboard. The reality is, Utah has a complicated relationship with the word nuclear. I think we had a time with nuclear weapons testing in Nevada that affected people that live here. That is a real history, that is a real fear, that if we want to talk about nuclear, we need to talk about those experiences. We have real experiences with uranium mining and people getting overdosing on radon and having cancer risk. If we want nuclear to be successful here in Utah, we need to talk to the people that live in Utah and make sure that they have the latest information, that they can make decisions from a place of knowledge. That is our big mission statement. We do not want to go to any community, to any county, and say, guess what, you're getting a nuclear power plant, and have them be surprised or worried. That's not how we're gonna do nuclear in Utah. So before the Nuclear Life Cycle Innovation Campus, before we put a lot of work into nuclear, the first thing we did was we partnered with a company called Envoy Public Labs, who's been doing nuclear education engagement for 15 years, to come up with a plan to do a community-driven nuclear education event in every county of Utah. So this map doesn't actually mean anything, it's just a cool map. So I realize now they're like, wait, what does orange mean? It doesn't mean anything, sorry. The point is that we want to go talk to the people that live in each county and say, what do you know about nuclear power? What are you worried about? What have you heard? I think a lot of people we talk to, generally not people like you in the room, but people we talk to think of Homer Simpson, right? They think of green goo, they think of three-eyed fish. And we want to make sure that people have an up-to-date education about what nuclear power looks like now. So we've done about 6 of these events. I don't think we've done Carbon and Emery yet. We're doing an event actually with the Mountain Ute tribe and Navajo tribe in San Juan County this Saturday. Our team went to Duchesne and went to the demolition derby there just to talk to people face to face about what they think about nuclear power. And again, they're all community driven. Weber County, they wanted to have like a sit down, subject matter experts talk about stuff. So we're pretty excited about that. No, okay. And kind of changing gears a little bit. Hopefully you've heard a little bit about this Brigham City energy ecosystem. Originally, the intent of this is to help prime the pump for the supply chain for nuclear. So as Jess was talking about, we haven't really built nuclear in the United States for 30 years. Supply chains are dead, right? So we need to bring some of that expertise back. So High Tech and Holtec have come together with Brigham City to come up with a manufacturing center and a training center. To your point, I apologize that I don't know your name back there, but one of the things that has to be done is you have to refuel these big nuclear power plants. And you can't just like wander out there and be like, okay, we're gonna do this. It's a training thing. So if you look at some of the mock-ups of what this training facility is gonna look like, they're gonna have a big deep pool so they can teach people to use the crane to pull the fuel rods out and put them in the deep pool. So, oh man, my thing looks ridiculous. BuildBrighamCity.com has all the information about that. So again, it's not just about power, but that's gonna bring, oh, sir. Hi, Mike.
Why did
I mean, I wasn't involved in that conversation.
No, it just, I mean, as I look at this, in Carbon County, Emery County, we're the hub for energy. Between coal, our power plants, whatever. So, and I'm thinking, we have a university there, and rural communities need that kind of publicity.
Yeah, I think if you go to their website, it specifically says why Brigham City. I wasn't involved in those negotiations. I apologize.
The state decision there, this Holtec decision, and then there's where they're building the power plant. They have actually had a pretty smooth ride this Holtec by putting that nuclear plant because that data center took a lot of heat off of.
Ha 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 ha. I'll tell you. Oh. Thank you. Okay, so the last thing that I really want to spend some time talking about is this Nuclear Life Cycle Innovation Campus. So a lot of people ask the question, what are we doing with spent nuclear fuel? And what we do now is because there isn't a repository for spent nuclear fuel. There's a repository for weapons waste, but there's not for spent nuclear fuel. So what happens now with all these big power plants, and hopefully everyone here knows that 20% of the electricity in the United States is provided by nuclear power plants, right? This is not a new technology. This is not an underrepresented technology. They take that spent nuclear fuel and they put it in a pool and they let it cool down for 20 years, and then they put it in concrete casks, super safe, bomb-proof, terrorist-proof casks, and they store it on site because there's nowhere to take it. And to the point, who was making this point? I think you were making the point, Dr. Pearson was making the point that we only use 5%. Oh, no, it was Jess, actually. Thank you, Jess, for teeing up this great point. Nuclear power, we only use 5% of the energy that's in a fuel rod, and then the rest just sits in a pool and cools down. The United States decided in the 70s that they didn't want to reprocess and recycle nuclear fuel. France and Japan do. This is not a technology that doesn't exist out there. It does. We just haven't done it in the United States. So this Life Cycle Innovation Campus is intended to take that spent nuclear fuel, reprocess it, recycle it, get the value out of it. There's medical isotopes. There's a ton of value. I've heard actually that with the spent nuclear fuel that we have now, we could power all our nuclear reactors for another 200 years. So the federal government put out a call for a response for information to ask states who's interested in hosting a campus that has all these capabilities side by side. There's private industry that's interested in doing this work. So it would take these several, I guess, life cycle companies and put them next to each other so they all can work together, they have the spent fuel together. They're saying it's a $10 billion potential investment, thousands of jobs. So when this came out, the Office of Energy Development went to the county commissioners. There was a meeting of all the county commissioners at the state capitol, and we said, who wants it? We, as a state, want it. Which county is interested? And there were several counties that were like, not us. We're not interested in doing that. And there were a few that said, yeah, we do want that. And we went through and we looked at what infrastructure is available, what's the level of commitment from the different counties. And the final concession came to Tooele County. So Tooele County is far enough away from population that they can host this type of campus, but they're close enough that they can attract the people that needs to work there. It's about 10,000 jobs they're thinking. And they have some experience, right? They have this low-level waste repository. So their county commissioners, their mayors, everyone is saying that they're on board with this plan. So, oh, yeah, Mike, go.
So Orangeville, that energy research center,
Yeah, well, and I think that research is still going to happen at the Energy Lab, 100%. That's why we're doing this nuclear education campaign. We'll see. It is not a done deal. Yes, and we will continue to do research here for sure, and we will continue to support Valor here 100%. This is a specific fuel cycle kind of campus. You'll see the timeline here. The federal government sent out their request for information. This is a terrible slide. It's so tiny. I apologize. We responded in April. In July, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the federal government that Utah would like to continue. As the senator was pointing out, there were 21 states actually that applied to this and said, yep, we would like this. We're actually down to 6 now. When Secretary Wright was at the Operation Gigawatt Summit, he did say that our application was outstanding. So we'll see what that means. But we do believe that Utah has a really strong case for this campus. So right now we're doing public information. Like I said, we don't want Salt Lake to lose their mind over this. We want people to know what's happening. We are not trying to keep this under a blanket. Oh, Senator Hankins, you know I live in Salt Lake. You're hurting my feelings. Okay, so once we get this memorandum of understanding, we're going to put together a working agreement document, and then we'll go back again to Tooele County and say, okay, this was sort of conceptual. This is what we're really thinking it's going to be. Are you still in? And when they say no, and Emery County, whatever. I'm just kidding. And then hopefully, after all this review, we're going to move forward with the project. I'm sure that people are going to have questions about that. So I'm going to answer questions about that. I just want to make one really quick plug. The Division of Water Resources has put together a state water plan. They included Office of Energy Development. We understand that there's a nexus between water and energy. I would really encourage people, if you are worried about water and who is not worried about water, to go here. The public comment is still open through August 23rd. They want to hear from everybody. And so as long as I'm here in Carbon and Emery, I wanted to encourage you to look at that and think about it. Okay. I did not look at my clock. I don't know how much time I have. I don't know. Am I good? Oh, excellent. Okay. Cool. All right. Lay it on me. Who's got the soft ones? Okay, Harry. Harry.
So with Operation Gigawatt's goal of like increasing capacity for energy, why focus so much on new technologies as opposed to just sticking with what we already know?
So I think the reality is we're good at what we know, and that stuff is going to enter the market as it should, because it can fight for itself, I think, and continues to fight for itself. And I think we're pretty clear about more of the above. There are for sure new natural gas plants planned, but that doesn't require any help from innovation and research, right? We're gonna continue to build what we know how to build, for sure. And we're gonna keep online what we keep online. I mean, for sure. Okay. You get me one tour of a coal plant and suddenly get to ask 100 questions? I'm kidding.
What is, when you say Operation Gigawatt, that's wonderful, but then what's the bottom line cost of this energy? And, I think that is the main thing of energy right now. Everybody's looking at gas, everybody's looking at coal. What is the goal and the cost?
Right. So the goal is to provide for economic development in the state of Utah. We believe that energy is fundamental to bringing business here, not just data centers, but all kinds of business. And we believe that the cost is going to be borne by the people who use that energy. So whatever the market will bear for those industries.
We can almost meet that requirement when we get Wolverine to buy IPP power plant to supply some more coal revenues. Why we can't.
Wowie zowie. I am not going to do that.
That would meet our meet or exceed what our needs would be if we could get that operational. Well, and that would be a big move, not just for Miller County, but for Carbon and Emery County, that's both of the total supply.
And the state remains deeply committed to getting IPP back online.
How deeply?
Deeply. I cannot disclose the details of a real estate deal, unfortunately. And honestly, I don't know them. I don't even know the deal. But when I asked, how much can I say about this, what's been happening? They said, you can say it's a real estate deal, so we can't speak to it. But we're deeply committed.
Can you talk a little bit about how the state is working with universities in terms of research to help move this operation gigawatt forward, and then job skilling, training, and where you might see some gaps that institutions have an opportunity to be able to support this?
Yeah, so we're definitely working with all of our universities on these skill sets. The University of Utah is bringing back their nuclear engineering program. They have a functioning nuclear reactor that they're able to base that on. So we have talked to all of our universities. We all have to be on board, especially, it's not just PhDs, it's not just super higher education, but it's electricians and welders, and we expect to be able to fill that entire breadth of the workforce, and that is definitely part, especially of this Nuclear Lifecycle Innovation Campus proposal. And I think I said it, but I probably should say it again. The entire RFI response is available online. There's an entire like 5-page section devoted to that topic, so I'm sure I'm not giving you the detail that you're hoping for, but it is available there.
Yeah, I just had a question of like, is there any consideration to put more coal power plants online? Not like IPP, but like put, Unit 4 onto Hunter Power Plant or anything like that. You said all types and everything else. I've heard of no person like say that they want another coal plant. So are we considering that at all?
So at this time, a new coal plant doesn't meet the economic requirements given the coal that we have online, but we're super committed to keeping the coal online that we have online.
But we are pushing to put something on the desert power plant, which we could viable as well as regenerating IPP power plants.
Yep.
With almost no new trying to keep them on. Well, not necessarily coal power plants, but with coal liquids, there's a lot of projects going on that right now, which is the same difference. Why? Because you burn diesel fuel, if you burn coal, correct? That's the same difference.
So I'm curious, you talk a lot about power generation, but what I'm not hearing anything about is the health of our transmission lines. For example, in Helper, I can't incorporate any variable energy types. It will blow out my transmission lines because my system's 80 years old. I've talked to Em about this. I've talked to the world about this. I would love to incorporate all of this potential power variability into our system, but without hardening my grid, I can't begin to even think about it. So is that even a conversation that's happening?
So the first pillar of Operation Gigawatt actually is transmission planning. I think I kind of glazed over it because people get a little bored, but I'd be happy to talk to you about that. One of the things that we're working on with the Office of Energy Development is a framework of working better with Rocky Mountain Power. And one of the concerns that they have expressed is how they do their transmission and distribution system planning. And we want to partner with them to ensure that they're able to do activities exactly like what you're talking about. So it's a huge piece, actually. I apologize. I kind of went to the exciting, sexy things, but you're right. Transmission actually is pillar number one. Anybody else? Okay. Lunch? Is that what's next, Jen? Okay, cool. Woo.
Thanks, Cindy. Okay, so lunch is up and it's on the side that had the snacks on it. So feel free to grab lunch, hang out, network, and then we'll finish up here. So thanks everyone for coming.